He's a senior lecturer in politics at Keele University and joins us now from Madeley in England. Philip, give us your take on today's developments.
Well, this is essentially a story of the last man standing. As your correspondent said, Mr. Sunak was not necessarily the head and shoulders candidate above the others. He's merely the person who survived and managed to get the number of nominations required. So Mr. Sunak is going to take over a Conservative Party that has been extremely divided, extremely bitter rancor inside it, but not very clear about what they're going to do next. They've tried Trussonomics, which has turned out to be an absolute political disaster for the Conservative Party. And now they're going to have to go with a new wave of austerity, which goes against the 2019 manifesto, which is what they keep citing as his mandate to govern without having an election. So these are going to be very difficult times for the Conservative Party and for Mr. Sunak. First of all, to unite the party. Second of all, to persuade the people that there shouldn't be an election. And thirdly, to find what exactly their policy platform ought to be for the next couple of years they're in power.
So what do you think Sunak's prospects are for winning at least some public confidence, not only in the Conservative Party, but in the government as a whole?
Well, the only direction is up from Truss. They've been so badly hurt by what she did and how she did it that the Conservative Party are polling abysmal levels. The Conservative Party has never polled this badly since we did opinion polling. So Mr. Sunak can only raise it. He'd have to do something pretty spectacular to go further, go below Truss. But the Conservative Party brand is extremely badly damaged. Many people in this country do not necessarily feel the Conservatives are the party that is there to support them during recessions, but they think it's a party that can manage the economy generally. That reputation has been smashed to pieces by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. So he's got to reassure people now that he can actually re-engage with the people with the Conservatives' idea they can run the economy.
So this has all been extremely confusing, especially for viewers who might not be familiar with the political system in the UK. So now that everyone that we know of course, has dropped out of the race, but the former finance minister, Rishi Sunak, what happens now? I mean, there's no need to do any kind of a vote, right? Or do they do that in case, do they have a system of write-in candidates? Remind our viewers what the process is from here.
Right. Well, in theory, had there been another candidate, this could have gone and would have gone to the members for the members of the Conservative Party to ratify this, to make a decision themselves. Sorry. There is no ratification here. This has been a decision by the parliamentary party. They've decided to keep the membership out of this, pretty much. The last time they gave members a choice, they went for Liz Truss. So the parliamentary party has tried best it can to keep this within Parliament and to essentially have a coronation of Mr. Sunak. Now, Mr. Johnson claims he got close, but he didn't. But essentially, he's now elected the Conservative Party leader. He's now going to become the Prime Minister, the person who can command a majority in the parliamentary chamber, the lower house, becomes the Prime Minister. And that's Mr. Sunak's right now. The question is, and this is the debate that many will be having in the UK, is do they have the rights to do this? They have a constitutional right to do this because our constitution says that he has a majority. But does he have legitimacy in order to carry through the decisions that aren't things that people voted on? The last election was 2019. A lot of water has gone under the bridge since then, including a lot of prime ministers' political careers. So they have to decide what they're going to do now. Can they keep on holding this line that the people gave them a mandate, Boris Johnson a mandate, to get Brexit done in 2019? Can they keep on using that line for a new wave of austerity? Can they use that line for the various changes they're going to have to make Brexit actually work, including some very difficult conversations with the European Union around things like the Northern Ireland Protocol bill? So there's lots of things which are basically brewing, that lots of problems he has to deal with. Whether he has the legitimacy to do this is a big question. He has the constitutional right, but he doesn't necessarily have the legitimacy.
Very good point. Okay, so as this was all shaping up over the last few days, one of the main arguments for Boris Johnson making this big political comeback, which would be very much in Boris Johnson's style. It would just add to the theater that all of this had been, was that he's still very popular within the country, and he would be the best person to go head-to-head against a Labour candidate in the next election. And it made it seem like, well, is this really just a race for the next election? And apparently not.
Well, Mr. Johnson isn't actually that popular with the public. He left with abysmal ratings, not quite as low as Liz Truss managed, but they weren't good. They were very poor, in fact. The Conservatives were getting beaten in their homelands when he was Prime Minister. People had not forgotten and have not forgotten Partygate. Now, the parts of the Conservative Party that feel a link to him because he won them that 2019 election, he won them that majority.
Sure,
so they feel that he's a winner in that sense. But his polling was actually pretty terrible towards the end. So there's something of myth. And also, let's remember that 2019 election was going against Jeremy Corbyn, who was uniquely unpopular in this country. He was seen by many to be a liability, dangerous even. So it's not clear that Mr. Johnson himself won this. I think he probably did carry some resonance in parts of the country where I'm living, for example. But I do not believe if Mr. Johnson went into the 2024-25 election that the Conservatives would do anywhere near as well as 2019. They would almost certainly lose the election, or at least they wouldn't win the election. They would probably end up, best they'd get is in hung parliament. So Mr. Johnson was not going to be the solution to the Conservative problems. Mr. Johnson, as ever, wanted Mr. Johnson to be the centre of attention. Mr. Johnson flew back from his Caribbean holiday hoping he could make a comeback. It's quite humiliating, Mr. Johnson, because all he could get was around 60 MPs to declare from out of 357 MPs in the House of Commons Conservative. This is quite a humiliation for Mr. Johnson. They couldn't get the 100 he needed, though he claims he did have it. Really, honestly, he did have it. That's his claims. Very few people believe Mr. Johnson when it comes to him telling you this. If he had 100 backers, he would have ran.
Yeah, I mean, his supporters, and maybe you could say his PR machine, is very effective at putting out these narratives that he's the dynamic leader to eventually go up against Labour. He's the person who can get it done. When, as you say, the support really wasn't that much. And we were talking about earlier this Conservative survey that was done, showing that each of these candidates have a negative approval rating. For Johnson, it was -24. For Penny Mordaunt, it was -15. And for Rishi Sunak, it was just -2. Still underwater, but he is the least disliked among the available candidates.
Yes, I mean, they've been in power now for more than 12 years. The economy is not doing well. The cost of living squeeze is very tight. The Conservative government is in disarray. And it's hardly surprising that none of them poll very well. Now, we have to remember that they spent a large part of the summer kicking chunks out of each other about how poorly the economy had been managed last few years. Well, Mr. Sunak was in charge of the economy for a good period of that. Okay, there was a pandemic and there is a war in Ukraine now. But people are associating the real hits in their take-home pay, the bills that are rising, and most of the other candidates are not really seen very positively. Mr. Sunak probably seen as your figures show, he's probably the least unpopular of the lot. But that's not exactly a popularity contest winner in ratings.
For sure. It has been excellent to talk to you, Philip Catney. Thanks for joining us.